part of this committee. I'm chair. At this time, we will have presentation 1A, transportation sales tax.
Update, presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Rob Mitchum with CARTA. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I wanted to just quickly give you an update on some activities at CARTA, and I'm going to start by pointing out a couple of upcoming things. We always want to promote these events and these opportunities for folks to take advantage of the system. We do have a senior free ride day coming up on February the 17th, and Earth Day free ride is in April on the 22nd. We also have phase 2 virtual meeting on our transit-oriented design and development project, which is currently online and available for people to participate online through the 17th of February. Always like to share good news and recognize folks that do a good job for CARTA every day. This is Jones Kinlock. He just celebrated his 47th year driving for CARTA. We've got maybe one or two more with that much time, and if you recall, last year we celebrated a driver and dedicated his favorite shelter on Meeting Street after 50 years. So we are continue to look for drivers. That's an ongoing struggle. I will tell you, in this market with CDL drivers, they're in high demand, and so keeping them is always a constant struggle. So that is something our contract operator continues to work on, but we are really appreciative to have folks like Jones who've been around a while, who take some of the younger folks under, train them, teach them, keep them in the right mental attitude, dealing with the public. So I just wanted to recognize him, which we've been doing for the last month or so on social media. A couple other things that happened. We had a ribbon cutting for the military magnet shelters. We have one on each side of the road there next to the high school. That particular shelter also will serve the senior center and the community center. It's just down from the school. So that was a good event. I will tell you, we are working and May could use a little help, Mr. Chairman, from the county to get some flashing pedestrian beacons associated with that crosswalk. If you're familiar with that stretch of road, I know, Mr. Darby, you are. Cars get going pretty fast as they come up next to the school there. So we're working with the district to try to get some flashing beacons installed there so that as those kids are crossing, and more importantly, as older folks start using that service to get to the senior center, obviously they take a little longer to get across the street because they're moving a little slower. So we want to try to make sure that we try to slow folks down a little bit, make sure they're aware that people are moving. Back in December, we also did our bike giveaway. We partnered with Second Chance, which does renovates and remodels bikes. We come across bikes sometimes at our shelters that get abandoned, get damaged, and people leave, and then we partner with them, and then we give them away. So we do that every December, and you can see we have some folks who are very happy to receive bicycles that they in turn then use to access the system. So it's a good event. Other things going on, we've continued to move forward with other shelters, other amenities. So we've got a couple more shelters in process. We've got 30 more soda lights that were installed in the last couple of months, and we've got some benches in process as well. Other projects we'll be undertaking here shortly is the comprehensive operational analysis. That's where we go in and look at the system, look at how it's performing, do a lot of public outreach, a lot of monitoring of the overall performance of the vehicles on the system to look for ways in which we can improve that performance. Obviously, one of the things we're most concerned about is on-time performance. We experience it ourselves, I'm sure. You all experience it, trying to get from point A to point B. Seems like every month it takes a little longer. So if we don't periodically go in there and make adjustments in the schedule, obviously that on-time performance goes off. People's expectations aren't met. When we have a schedule that says they're going to be able to get to a particular stop by a certain time and that doesn't happen, obviously that's not good customer service. So this process will allow us to sort of tweak that to adjust some of the congestion growth that's occurred and be able to get on-time reliability where it needs to be, as well as help get us prepared for better connections to the LCRT project. Shipwhat Square, that project is moving along. We're simply waiting on the NEPA approval at this stage of the game. As soon as we get that, we're in pretty good shape with the design. We'll have a few things probably left to tweak, and then hopefully we can get that out to construction underway here fairly shortly. I will point out and remind you that that does have a second component to it. The top of that building, the second floor, will be the Workforce Training Center. So we will have a great opportunity for folks to be able to access that center using the transit system. And a part of that grant, we also built in CDL training, because obviously as I mentioned, we're struggling with CDL training and drivers, and we're not the only ones. The port has a huge challenge ahead of them as boomers are retiring and they need to replace them. So we'll be able to train not only folks for the service that they provide through CARTA, but also folks who might want to drive a truck, whether that's a dump truck or 18-wheeler. So if you go by the main campus at Trident on Rivers Avenue, you'll see those trucks. They already have that system in place, and we'll be able to expand that service and provide a higher level of access for folks, because right now we have more people than we have slots, and so that is a problem. We're also getting real close to being able to move forward with breaking ground on the Mount Pleasant Street parcel. That's down next to Joseph Floyd Manor. It's that sort of pie-shaped piece of property that will be a park and ride. Been through the design review committee of the city of Charleston a couple times. Last thing that's come up now, sort of last minute, is they want us to put the Dominion power lines that are currently above ground underground, and it's been a little bit of a challenge because it's such a tight piece of property to begin with, but we're working through that, and hopefully we can get there fairly shortly. We have a plan. Hopefully it'll be something that works for everybody. And then finally, I'll just point out that we continue to see increases in our mobile ticketing. That's where folks can simply take their phone, hop on, scan it, and sit down. They don't have to put money in. They don't have to worry about the paper passes. We will continue to have both cash and paper passes as options, but we continue to see this become more and more popular. And again, it helps speed up that process and makes it easier for folks who love the technology. Quickly, an update on LCRT. We continue to move forward on it. Had a public meeting in December, pretty well attended. That's something we wanted to do because the right-of-way process is underway. So we wanted to give folks the opportunity to come in and talk about any issues, any concerns, any questions. Had quite a few folks show up. Pleasantly surprised that there was no real negativity. Most folks were on board, very happy with the progress, except for it's not happening fast enough. That was the common theme, is can you speed it up? So that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, and I'm sure that's something y'all hear on every highway project. We're in the engineering phase, so we continue to work through that. We're continuing to coordinate with FTA and SCDOT, as well as some other partners, to try to move through that process. Obviously, we've got changes that are occurring in Washington with the new administration, so we continue to try to maintain close communication there to make sure that we're making whatever adjustments we need so that we continue to stay on track. We're right now in sort of the final design phase, what we call the 90% plans. So the next couple of weeks, we're meeting with the City of Charleston staff, City of North Charleston staff, your folks, to talk about that final design, to make sure that we tweak anything, look at what we need to do as far as getting ready for construction. As you call, this is a very long corridor, 21 miles, so we're having conversations with DOT about how that's going to be let for contract when that time comes, because it's not likely that we can let that all in one contract, so we'll probably have to phase it. So all those kinds of conversations are starting to occur so that we can have that plan pretty solid when the time comes. So again, here we are at 90%, and you can see kind of where it takes us the rest of the year. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. I will finally, I think probably the final thing I'll say is Our fiscal year is a federal fiscal year at Carter, so it ended September 30th. We did, again, end in the black, so I'm pleased to report that. The audit will be presented in March. It's usually February, but our auditor's going through his peer review process, so that kind of pushed him back a little bit. And so we'll have that for the board in March, but don't anticipate any issues or problems at this stage of the game.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitchum. Mr. Pryor?
Mr. Mitchell, just a couple of questions. LCRT, it's coming right, we know it's coming right down the middle of Rivers Avenue.
Yes, sir.
So what are we going to do with the replacement of that 7-mile bridge? Because if these buses are going to have to stop for train traffic, it makes no sense to, you know, to go for it. I know that North Charleston has 40 million, and we were trying to get another 73 million, you know, to get that done. But is there a plan in place? It's just like the intersection improvements on Ashley Phosphate and some on Remount. I mean, if we're not going to be able to do that, and you coming down the middle of Rivers Avenue and the train stops you, I mean, how's that progress?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We did work with the city of North Charleston. As you know, that's something we've been trying to get resolved for a while, the fact that they had $40 million for probably what's a $100 million project. And so how could we get the rest of that resolved? You know, it's not a bridge that's slated for replacement under the DOT program, as bad as it looks if you've driven underneath it and as tight as it is. So we worked with the city of North Charleston, and we just helped them get roughly $1 million grant with the Federal Railroad Administration. They have a particular program that is designed to eliminate rail crossings or eliminate sort of the conflict. So it is sort of the first phase of that, and that's going to give us the engineering money to finalize a design that then we will get to the point where we're shovel ready. And then there are subsequent pots of money that give us the opportunity to apply for the actual construction. So I will say having $40 million is match money puts them in much, much better shape than a lot of those other projects that typically don't have that level of funding available to provide as match. So we feel pretty good. We've hosted a few meetings with the feds and the city and our folks, and all indications have been positive. Obviously, we've had a change in administration, so we've got to look at how we have to adjust things. We've already gotten some new initiatives coming out of the Department of Transportation at the national level. So how we address things, how we approach things will have to be a little bit different. You know, we received a DOT order yesterday that focuses on economic development, return on investment, cost-benefit analysis. So a lot different terms than what we've seen in the last few years. So not uncommon that we have to make adjustments when administrations change, but obviously there's some benefit to this particular project because, as you know, those trains are getting longer, so the delays are getting longer, and it's not just Carter, it's every business that's trying to move goods up and down Rivers Avenue that gets caught there too. So there's a clear cost-benefit component there that we'll just have to capture.
Anyone else?
I just want to ask, this venture down Rivers Avenue, in reference to COG, and of course, one day, irrespective of how many roads we build, Charleston County, it's going to be filled to capacity because of population. Is there an idea or means or thought about light rail as a remedy? Not a cure, but a remedy for transportation problems, sir?
Yeah, if you go back in the history of the LCRT, you know, that's kind of how we got to LCRT with the system that we're proposing. Is we initially started out with studying, you know, could we do some light rail? And keep in mind, this was over 10 years ago. And back then, the cost of light rail was, at a minimum, $2 billion. So 10 years ago, $2 billion. Now, we've gotten a little bit more comfortable with $1 billion around here these days, but back then, that was a ton of money. But what I will tell you is light rail is not as popular in our country as it was initially because people moving and patterns changing, and it's very, very difficult. For us to put light rail in, we have to have a separate rail corridor because the light rail gauge is different than the same gauge that Norfolk Southern or CSX use. So it's a different size gauge. So you've got to have a totally separate rail corridor. So you've got to have all the right-of-way associated with that. So it's just enormous amount of land. So we did look at it, and we went from there to, at that time, trying to look at shared access with the Norfolk Southern line, and quite frankly, made a good bit of progress until BMW started contracting with them to ship vehicles. And then they, all of a sudden, the capacity they thought they had, they might be able to work with us on doing some passenger rail. They were no longer interested. And so, thank you, Mr. Bishop.
Mr. Moody?
Milton, Mr. Pryor, I just had a question. Which intersection, because the trains cross Rivers Avenue at 526 and Durant?
Durant and Rivers.
Okay,
And it
and all the way
actually was
down.
supposed to be a little further up where Parks Auto Parts at too. And the way I remember, when they cut the deal for the port wasn't supposed to open
Until the
they
overpass
had
is
all
done.
these- And it was
Yep.
supposed to be down at 4 Mile, where they're gonna make a U-turn and come back around.
Mm-hmm.
And all that stuff is gonna be routed to where it's gonna be on the Ackerby side of this, so that the neighborhood is actually gonna be destroyed. And so by allowing the port to open and taking this $40 million and say we do it ourselves, now we stuck. Okay, not us, but the city took that money, saying that they could do it. But the agreement was first made that the port wouldn't open until all these
Yeah.
overpasses were in place. Well, the port is open now, LCRT is gonna be stuck, you know, we don't have the money to do it. So, I mean, good luck with trying to get the grants, you know, everybody is trying to get the same thing.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mitchum, thank you for being here. The land at the fairgrounds, is that closed?
Not yet. We have another court appearance on February the 10th. So we continue to march down that path. We continue to, the judge continues to side with us, but then there's always an opportunity for appeal. So there's another appearance, but we feel like we're finally getting close. We've resolved a lot of the issues, and there's fewer and fewer things to talk about.
Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchum. At this time,
Thank you.
1B, presentation, Main Road Segment C, update.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of council. My name is Alex Oziak. I'm our Capital Programs Manager here with Charleston County Public Works. I'm here this evening to give you another project update on our Main Road Segment C project. As you may recall, we had our third public meeting back in May of 24. We presented our preferred alternative, which was Alternative 8. Received over 430 comments on the project. However, only a little less than 25% were actually in support of the project as is. With another 35% or so looking to have some modifications to the project. Another 40% were completely against the project. So following that presentation on the public comments we made to council back in September, council asked us to take a step back and reevaluate the project and look to see if we could make some potential reductions in the scope of the project and still provide some traffic improvements. Specifically, we're looking at stopping the roadway improvements at Plowground along with the multi-use path, keeping the intersection improvements that we had there at River Road and Edenvale, shifting the location of the multi-use path to the east side of Bohicket Road, and looking at ways we could reduce impacts to private property and the natural environment, all the way maintaining a acceptable level of service for traffic improvement. So here is just kind of summarizing some of those concerns. Again, we looked at ending those improvements at Plowground. However, based on the traffic projections, the roadway widening all the way down to Edenvale is necessary to maintain an acceptable level of service in our 2045 design year. Stopping those improvements not only would have a failing level of service at Edenvale, but increased congestion along Bohicket Road between Plowground and River Road. We also looked at relocating the multi-use path to the east side. It made good sense at the public meeting because that's where a lot of residential development is located. However, there's also additional right-of-way challenges with shifting that location where we might have to potentially acquisition for some strip property takes for about 20 residential properties along the roadway. There's an opportunity to potentially shift those roadway improvements away from them to lessen those right-of-way impacts, but that would bring up another issue with impacts to grand live oaks that are along the existing corridor. I've got some pictures here that kind of show some of the improvements we had planned for River Road. We had a dual-lane roundabout proposed at this intersection. However, looking back at the traffic, we could keep the existing intersection as it is today with a traffic signal, which would still provide an acceptable level service of C in our 2045 design year. Edenvale, we also had a dual-lane roundabout proposed for this intersection. Again, if we stop those improvements north of this intersection at plow ground, obviously you wouldn't have the dual lanes feeding into the intersection. If you reduce this to one single lane roundabout, we'd have a failing level of service in the design year. We even looked at going back and looking at a traffic signal, and again, we'd have to have that widening and additional capacity in order for the intersection to function properly. This is actually focusing now on the plow ground intersection itself. The things highlighted in red are actually the bridges we had proposed to go over the creeks there. Again, stopping those intersectional plow grounds, while it would limit some of those impacts a little bit, we'd still have to create these bridge structures in order to provide the proper transition length to convert from a 4-lane facility and squeeze that back down to a 2-lane road as you head towards Edenvale. And then with a multi-use path, I'm going to see if I can't highlight some. So right along the existing edge of the road is currently a 4-foot pedestrian sidewalk. We had proposed a 12-foot multi-use path along the west side of Bohicket Road. Now, if we were to shift that to the south, even at reducing that multi-use path to the bare minimum that the DOT allows at 8 foot, once you have the required offset from the shoulder of the roadway, there just isn't enough space to squeeze that multi-use path in and still provide drainage. We've looked at even if you converted to a curb and gutter section and piped all your stormwater under the ground, there still wouldn't be enough room for us to fit in there. The existing right-of-way would have to do some sort of strip takes for all these different residential properties. And now, again, we talked about we could potentially avoid that by shifting those improvements, all the roadway improvements to the west, but now we're impacting not only a lot of the grand live oaks we had placed in these refuge medians, but also existing trees that were going to stay in place because we weren't going to touch the existing sidewalk and edge of the roadway. Shifting that now would impact those additional live oaks as well. We also had some additional concerns we were looking at, obviously trying to look to see how we could reduce impacts to both businesses and residences through the corridor, specifically at the Maybank and Main Road intersection. However, due to just the development of that intersection with parking and building so close to the road, just given the congested nature of that corridor, it's near impossible to eliminate any kind of impacts to businesses in that intersection. Again, mentioned about reducing the tree impacts. By stopping those roadway improvements at plow ground, we certainly would reduce the impacts to grand live oaks. Initially, we had identified about 67 grand live oaks that are graded C, which an arborist has come out and taken a look at these trees, and they said anything graded C or better is a good, healthy tree. Something graded D is probably a tree that's not doing so well, and anything graded F is probably a tree that's dying and would need to be removed. So we identified 67 of those good, healthy live oaks that would need to be removed. We could reduce that number down to 25 by stopping those improvements at plow ground. However, as I mentioned, with difficulties with the multi-use path and the shifting that location, there's potential to impact an additional 20 live oaks. So it pretty much brings us back to right where we started with, about 60 or so grand live oak impacts. I also looked at reducing impacts to the natural environment. At the time, we were made aware at the public meeting that there are some conservation easements that the Low Country Land Trust has put in place on portions of property between plow ground and Edenvale that we would be impacting with that. Not only that, we would also be impacting some conservation easements next to the Angel Oak property, as well as their planned redevelopment for some parking at that property. Now, I've got some slides here that kind of show those in more detail. So looking here at the Main and Maybank intersection, as you can see, we've got these buildings hashed out. We're slated for potential relocations. Shifting that shared use path or even shifting those roadway improvements to the north or the south, we could certainly minimize those impacts, but now you're just shifting those impacts to one side of the road or the other. Mm-hmm. There's really no way to squeeze down the improvements, to provide any kind of improvement in traffic in the design year and eliminate or reduce those impacts to those businesses. Again, mentioning about those additional tree impacts along here in the median, we specifically had this divided median to keep those Grand Live Oaks in that median. Shifting the potential location of those roadway improvements would certainly impact those trees. Now, so this is the section of Bohicket here between Edenvale on the left side of the screen and Plow Ground, which would be on the right. So these 4 large tracts of land here are all under a conservation easement. So obviously stopping those improvements at Plow Ground would eliminate those proposed impacts. However, when we look here at the Bohicket Road between Maybank and Plow Ground, this property here identified as number 266 is also within a conservation easement. So we'd be still having impacts on that easement there. Going back to the Angel Oak Road, it might be a little difficult to see. We have our proposed right-of-way line is marked in orange, and it cuts right through the middle of their planned relocated parking facility. Currently, folks visiting the Angel Oak park on Angel Oak Road, and they're parking on the roots of the Angel Oak itself. I believe we've been told that the roots could extend for a mile or even more from where the tree is located. So obviously they're trying to shift that parking away from the roots of the tree and lessen those impacts to the natural environment. With our proposed roadway improvements, we'd be impacting all that parking, which would require the Low Country Land Trust to shift the location of that parking to still provide that, which would again result in even more Grand Live Oaks impacts. And so lastly, I wanted to touch on some additional project challenges we're facing. As you're probably aware, this is a 2016 sales tax project, and we're utilizing a kind of a pay-as-you-go approach with this sales tax, where we're trying to balance our expenditures with revenues as they're collected. Where we use a lot of bonded money for our 2004 sales tax, we could get started on engineering on these projects as soon as that sales tax was approved. However, due to the some massive cost overruns we've seen on our Main Road Segment A project, we had to divert funding that had been originally allocated for Segment C to fund those cost overruns for Main Road Segment A. Our original cost estimate for Main Road Segment A was about $195 million. The construction contract alone came in at $350 million. Overall project costs with design and right-of-way, construction engineering inspection are anticipated to be around $400 million for the project. So that left us with quite a deficit to fill in. Also, as part of the failed 2024 transportation sales tax referendum, we'd identified an additional $282 million that would have come from those collections that would help fund increased costs we've seen on our other 2016 sales tax projects, mainly based with the ridiculous inflation we've seen over the last couple of years. Now with the failure of that referendum, we're also looking at our other remaining sales tax projects and seeing how we can reduce the scope and cost of those projects to fit within our available funding. I know staff is planning to come back at a March 6th meeting and provide a little more details on our sales tax program and how we're facing those challenges. And so with that, I just wanted to kind of summarize the points I touched on this evening. Again, stopping those improvements at Plow Ground, as we've been asked to look at, would lead to failing levels of service at the intersection south and additional increases in congestion and delay. Shifting the impact of the multi-use path would likely lead to additional right-of-way impacts and or Grand Live Oak impacts. It's certainly impossible to avoid the private property impacts at the intersection of Maybank and Main and still provide some improvements to future traffic. We would reduce Grand Live Oak impacts by about 60% by stopping those improvements at Plow Ground, but if we were trying to manipulate the project for that multi-use path, those impacts would almost be offset. And then we certainly reduce those impacts to the natural environment with the no longer impacting those conservation easements, but we're still having some significant impacts to that one conservation easement on Bohicket, and then certainly the Angel Oak parking area as well. And we have been unable to satisfy the concerns that were raised by the citizens at our public hearing meeting, and certainly with the lack of available funding to continue the project, even with our reduced scope of the project. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oziak. Council members, do you have any questions for Mr. Oziak at this time?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I have one, Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair Kabrowski.
Thank you very much for your thorough presentation. And I wasn't here in the 2016 sales tax, but I'm a little confused. If they were funded by the sales tax, why are they having to be scaled back now if they were things that were approved then? Wasn't the funding part of the referendum that was approved?
Yes, certainly funding was approved as part of that referendum. Again, that was in 2016, and here we are 9 years later, and while we build in some level of inflation into those costs to accommodate that, we've just seen record inflation over the last couple of years. I think a lot of studies have thrown out a number of about 70% increase in construction cost over the last couple of years alone. So we are just scrambling to try to find a way to continue to fund these projects as the costs increase, and trying to maybe scale back the scope of the projects as we can to still provide benefit, but try to keep within our available budget.
Did this, again, the 2016 sales tax, did that not encompass inflation in the construction cost?
It did. Our usual rule of thumb is about a 3% inflation rate on an annual basis, and it's just been way in excess of that. No one could have, seen that this was, these increasing costs of what we'd be facing.
Mr. Oziak, Mr. Thigpen is going to step in with some of these questioning.
Councilman Krabowski, we, in working with the Mac Dial and the finance group, we included about a 3 to 5% inflationary number year over year when we did the cost estimates for the 2016 sales tax referendum. Unfortunately, in 23 and 24 alone, those increases were over 58% just in those 2 years. So while we did include inflationary numbers, we did not foresee the kind of inflation that we have seen over the last couple of years.
Vice Chairman,
Go ahead if there's any other questions I might have.
council members, is there someone else who would like to ask Mr. Oziak or, yes, Mr. Orman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know how much this is not. It sounds like the major issue in the room at this point, but reminded on 41. I think we just sort of scaled back the year at which we were willing to accept a failing level of service. I'm just curious. I think we were saying it's got a failing level of service at 2045 if we stop at Plowground.
Yes.
I mean, is it acceptable at 2040, or when does that fail? Do you know specifically, or have we calculated that? And I might be misremembering exactly what we did on 41, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about that.
I know we have that data that shows exactly probably what year you're going to be experiencing that feeling. I don't have those numbers with me this evening or know them off the top of my head, unfortunately.
And at this point, it would not matter
Yeah.
because there's no money.
I acknowledge that.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Yes, Mr. Boykin and then Councilman Moody.
Mr. Oziak, can you estimate what the shortage of Main Road Corridor Segment A is at present?
Currently, like I said, we have diverted our available funding to fully fund that project. So the funding is there for this project. We've had to take the funding and redivert the funding for Segment C to help fund that project.
And then if we didn't do that, the project could not move forward?
That's correct. And at this point, we're locked in because we've already issued the construction contract to the design build team.
Nothing further, sir.
Much. Anyone else? Thank you so much, Mr. Oziak.
Thank you.
So it is safe to say that Main Road Segment C has gone with the referendum. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, item 2, resolutions, 2A, Black History Month. Thank you so much. 2A and B, moved and approved and properly seconded. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposers, nay. Thank you very much. Item 3, consent agenda. 3A, Resiliency and Sustainability Advisory Group Committee.
Move for approval 3A through 3C.
Thank you so much. Properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposers, nay. The ayes have it. Item 4, 4A, Cortland and Dawning.
Move for approval.
Properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposers, nay.
And someone define project eminent domain.
So, Mr. Adams, would you like to speak to this project? We've been working on this for years, Mr. Darby, even prior to my redistricting and receiving the district. We do have members of the Red Top Community and Community Association. If you all would stand up, those of you who are here, Dr. Dover and our wonderful family from Red Top who are here with us tonight. This is their project. And so just wanted the council persons to see that y'all are here, to see this all the way through. The community is extremely involved and engaged, and we've been actively working with them on this. You all may be seated. And so, Mr. Adams, please explain to Mr. Darby.
Yes, sir. Councilman Darby, there's 4 tracks that are heirs properties where we need right-of-way acquisition to construct the road. Of those tracks, 3 of the tracks support it, and they've signed concurrence letters saying that they support the project. We just need to go through the legal process because all the heirs cannot be identified. The one other track, the people on the property are not opposed to the project. They're just opposed to not being able to receive direct payment. And that's out of our control, so that is just part of the right-of-way acquisition process where the funds are deposited with the clerk of court, and then the heirs can go make their claim on that property. So we're not seeing any opposition from the community to the project. It's just a necessary step, being that they're heirs properties for us to acquire the right-of-way legally.
Now, in terms of this right-of-way, sir, are we talking market value or beyond market value, since something cultural will be destroyed forever?
So we follow the state-approved process for right-of-way acquisition. So there's a fair market appraisal done as part of that process.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked, for a number of years in North Charleston, when there was an eminent domain on the well-to-do section of West Montague Avenue, I know one young lady got 12 times the amount of market value. And I'm not making that up. And if people are going to lose something, particularly of severe value, something that's been in their family forever and ever, I just don't always think that market value is the correct price for that. So I'm just saying so, but so there's nothing that could be done beyond market value, sir. That's just state law?
Yes, sir. We're following the process. I will say that these are very minor kind of strip takes. There's no homes being displaced, no one being displaced. Very minor. We've tried to work around it as best we could, but there's just, to construct the road with the ditches as we need to, we need a little bit of right of way to get that done.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Did we go through with the vote? All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposers, nay. Thank you so much. Item 5A, Charleston Home Phase 4.
Move for approval.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. Item 6A.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Prior to going to 6, if Mr. Werman could assist us in the next time in terms of the of that 20 million, could we get an update of what's left, of any at all, for the next meeting? Is that possible? Don't need to know now, but is that possible for the next meeting, sir?
Yes.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you so much. Item 6A, FY25 Budget Ordinance Amendment for Special Purpose Districts.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposers, nay. Ayes have it. There is a need for an executive session. Let me also just give a precursor that, again, it is our hope to remain as transparent as possible, certainly as it relates to the executive session process. I never said that I'm against executive sessions. I just simply said that there are times that, we could talk about some of these things in public where it would be a benefit to our citizens and taxpayers. This is one of those occasions where executive session is necessary, and I have also said that when we go in executive session, so I've been briefed and schooled, that it becomes the chair's prerogative to moderate the discussion, and so we're going to executive session. The attorney will outline the rationale as to why. For legal advice, and so I would just say to us that when we go, we receive the information, questions that are legal in nature that we have for the attorney or attorneys. We will ask those questions, and I'm going to ask our attorney the time frame that she feels that this information sharing on her part should take, so that would bound us, because we have all these folk who will be sitting here waiting for us to come back, so we can give them some sense of time as to when we're coming back. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. This item should not take any more than 15 minutes from
Very
a legal
well.
perspective. An executive session is necessary to discuss the terms of a proposed agreement with regards to the case listed on the agenda, City of Charleston, South Carolina, et al. Versus Airbnb et al.
Thank you very much,
Move for
Madam
executive
Attorney.
session.
Second.
Mr. Attorney
Probably moved
outlines.
and seconded, and we shall return. The Attorney says 15 minutes, so by 5:57.
Graham, take a vote.
We're coming back from executive session. Took us a minute to walk back there, so I think we're right where we need to be as it relates to time. No votes were taken and no actions were taken in executive session. Thank you so much. And at this time, any council person? Yes, Mr. Boykin.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the agreement and authorize its execution.
Second.
Seconded, that we approve the settlement and authorize the settlement agreement to be executed. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. Thank you so much. Meeting adjourned.
Very good meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All right.